Well, Red Bull have done it again and in record time this season. Liam Lawson out, Yuki Tsunoda in, and the Japanese driver finally gets to take his revenge on every time Helmut Marko criticised his racing and Christian Horner questioned his mentality, because he is the last hope for the Red Bull team to have anyone alongside Max Verstappen that can actually perform to the level that they expect from their number 2 driver. It's insane that it's come to this. The driver that they shunned 3 months ago, the driver that has been constantly overlooked, even when he's been performing well because of his mentality, as if that hasn't changed in the 5 years since he's been a rookie, the driver that looked set to be dropped from the sister team at the end of the year when Christian Horner said back in December, "We're acutely aware if we're not able to provide an opportunity for Yuki, being in all honesty this year, does it make sense? You can't have a driver in the support team for 5 years, you can't always be the bridesmaid. You've either got to let them go at that point or look at something different." Is the driver that they've had to turn to just 2 races into 2025 to try and get their season back on track. Justice is best served 5'3". Even Honda were backing away from Tsunoda after Lawson got that seat ahead of him. Honda Racing Corporation president Koji Watanabe said about Tsunoda's future, he needs to take action himself. He's now in his 5th year, has the ability and understands the world of F1 well. There's not much more that we can do for him. Drivers can't rely on Honda forever. Someone of Tsunoda's career level needs to think for himself, which triggered Yuki to reorganize his management team in February ahead of this season, where he would have been in discussions with all the teams up and down the grid so that he could have continued his Formula One career outside of the Red Bull family for 2026 and beyond, not expecting this huge U-turn from Red Bull just 2 races into the season. So Yuki Tsunoda is in a very strange position in that he would have likely been out of the sport in the next year or 2, and now has the chance to completely reverse that. He could save Red Bull's season by helping them score points consistently, whilst fixing their impossible to drive car that even Max Verstappen is unhappy with, and become a driver who is in a top team that all of the other teams will be keeping an eye on for the future if he becomes available. That is if he can perform. We have seen Tsunoda up his levels under pressure before. I was thinking back to the time that he had alongside Pierre Gasly and how that was a little bit of a disaster, really. He was crash prone, made very silly errors, and became more known for his outbursts on the radio than his ability to deliver out on track. But I think Gasly moving away from the team was actually very helpful for Tsunoda. He was always going to be playing catch up next to Gasly, and with the talent that Pierre had, he was always going to be the less experienced teammate that people were going to look down upon. But with Gasly moving to Alpine, it allowed Tsunoda the opportunity to make the team his if he could outperform whoever came in alongside him. And even though Nick de Vries was brought in as the experienced number 1 in that team, seeing that he was a lot older than Yuki Tsunoda and had tested a tremendous amount of Formula One machinery without ever getting the chance to hop into a full-time seat until that point, once Yuki was side by side with de Vries, he stepped up massively at the start of the 2023 season and made de Vries look incredibly slow in comparison. Then 10 races later, they put in Daniel Ricciardo, again with the idea that Ricciardo would be that number 1 in the sister team with his experience, and then they would have Daniel to replace Sergio Perez in the main team. Remember, it was Ricciardo that was given the chance to complete a tyre test for Red Bull at Silverstone that year when Perez and de Vries were underperforming, not Yuki. But again, Yuki stepped it up another gear and got the better of Ricciardo over their time together. The fact that they hadn't ever backed Yuki to really be the number 1 until this season, where they brought in Isaac Hadjar beside him, even though Tsunoda had shown that up to this point he can step up his game when he needs to, and having comfortably beaten both of the drivers which Red Bull saw as likely sister team number 1 drivers ahead of Yuki Tsunoda, it was surprising that they opted for Lawson, undermining all of that hard work and basically ignoring all of the growth that Yuki had gone through in the last 4 years. But now that Tsunoda is finally getting his shot with Red Bull, there are only 2 ways that this can go. He could go into that seat alongside Max and be exactly what the Red Bull team are looking for in a teammate to Max Verstappen. And there are definitely things going in his favour. Yuki has started the 2025 season another level up on the Yuki that we've seen before. Throughout 2024, he showed that he can have a fairly consistent season. He, of course, had a few spins here and there, as most drivers do, but he was able to deliver a very high standard every race weekend, particularly in the first half of the year. There was a dip just after the summer break, but the RB car also became less competitive at that point as the Alpine and Haas cars started to up their game. What I'm trying to get at is that Yuki was very consistently in the discussion for drivers sneaking their way into Q3 and putting his car in the points whenever the car was competitive enough to do so. And he's followed that into this year, where again he's qualified incredibly well in all 3 qualifying sessions and should have scored points on both race weekends had it not been for the awful tyre choices from his strategy team. Now he's in a faster car. If he finds that form that he had last year and the start of this year continues in the same vein, he could easily be in the mix for finishing in the top 5 or 6 places most weekends. And additionally, Yuki's driving style is naturally much more suited to what Max Verstappen likes also when compared to the rest of the grid. I remember Franz Tost, the previous team lead at Racing Bulls, discussing Yuki's driving style and saying that his driving style belongs to the modern driving styles, and he knows what he wants. He doesn't like so much a car that understeers. He doesn't like it when the car at the apex is washing out. He doesn't care so much about the rear end of the car. So Yuki does like a sharp front end, which the Red Bull most certainly has, as we often see Max doing the same thing, controlling the car from the front end as he goes through the corners. And if you're wondering what I mean when I say the car has a sharp front end, Alex Albon actually gave a really good explanation when he was talking about his time at Red Bull, saying to give people an explanation what that might feel like. I don't know if you play computer games at all, but if you bump up the sensitivity completely to the max and you move the mouse, it's just darting across the screen everywhere. That's kind of how it feels. It becomes so sharp that it makes you a little bit tense. But Yuki quite likes that, and if you watch his onboards, he likes throwing the car into the corners and controlling the car as it tries to slide away from him. He brakes hard and late into the corners, carrying a lot of speed on entry, but slowing the car down a lot as he gets towards the apex, straightening the car up as soon as he possibly can as he exits the corner, and getting onto the throttle hard rather than slowly building up to 100% throttle. It's probably why he was so crash heavy initially when he entered F1, because he was carrying a little bit too much speed or trying to get on the throttle a little too early, but at least now he has become much better at keeping the car on track, whilst also finding the absolute limits of what the car and the tyres will allow, whilst also becoming accustomed to the F1 tyres, which I still think are one of the biggest barriers to entry when you want to be fast throughout an entire race. So in terms of driving style, he should be set up well for the Red Bull. He even said himself after the test in the 2024 Red Bull at the end of last season that he felt like the car suits my driving style, and I haven't struggled much to adapt. Even on the long runs, I've been able to run consistently today and was able to feel the limitations of the car, which if you don't have confidence in the car, you're unable to. Of course, he was trying to convince Red Bull to pick him then, so take that as you may, but the mixture of confidence from Tsunoda's improved form over the last few seasons, along with the fact that he feels like he'll be able to go straight into that Red Bull and be able to adapt to the way in which you need to drive it to get some performance from the car, means that there should be a lot of hope around what Yuki can achieve alongside Max Verstappen in the main team compared to what Liam has been able to do. Then if Yuki can actually get amongst the top drivers in the next few races, something that even Perez struggled to do towards the end of his time at Red Bull, that would be more than enough to convince the rest of the grid from top to bottom that Yuki is a driver that should be an option they consider when a seat becomes available. Even just one podium, or in a dream world a win, would justify the decision from Red Bull's side, but also give Yuki a lot of options to escape from Red Bull in the future, as the teams who half-heartedly had a look at him last year before RB triggered the extension in his contract will be taking that interest a lot more seriously, and all the talk of him being the number one at Aston Martin or Cadillac suddenly has a lot more conviction behind it. But let's not get too carried away just yet, as the switch could also end up not being a positive experience for Yuki, as there are a lot of factors that are also playing against Yuki in all of this, which does make me wonder, what happens if Yuki performs as Lawson did? Yuki is having to go into a team that is all new to him. He's never even been the reserve driver for Red Bull before, meaning that outside of that postseason test last year, he's never worked with any of the main Red Bull team mechanics before. Even a driver with the experience of Lewis Hamilton has spoken about how much he's having to adapt to his new team after his move to Ferrari. Even though at its core, Formula One is just driving a car and it feels like an individual sport, it really isn't. The drivers and the car's performance is a culmination of thousands of people all coming together. together. For Yuki to perform, he needs to become an integral part of that whole network of people, and he's going to be expected to get results almost instantly after getting in that Red Bull car. Alongside getting to know the entire team and adapting to how that new car drives, it's not going to be easy. And from what we've seen this season, that is especially true when it comes to this year's Red Bull. Adapting to this car is a whole extra level of difficult. As we mentioned before, Yuki does like a car with a sharp front end, but this Red Bull looks like it's even on the extreme end of what Max Verstappen can deal with. Albon has said before, I like a car that has a good front end, so quite sharp, quite direct. Max does too, but his level of sharp and direct is a whole different level. It's eye-wateringly sharp. And if this car is so sharp that even Max has been struggling with it so far this season, there is a worry that in the same way it was too difficult for Lawson to get on top of, it may also be too difficult for Yuki. So as much as I'm hopeful that Yuki's experience and driving style will play into his favour, it's no guarantee that he'll do any better than Lawson, or really than Perez did, because that should be the target really. The whole point of paying Perez out of a contract was to improve upon the 8th place finishes that he was getting every week, and Yuki now has that pressure weighing on him, and the fact it's his home race too. I'm not sure baptism of fire does the circumstances Yuki Tsunoda finds himself in true justice. But I'd love to know what you think in the comments down below. Are you hopeful that Yuki can come in and be the teammate to Max that Red Bull need him to be? Or are we about to see another driver come into the Red Bull setup just to be criticised, scrutinised, and thrown out? If you have enjoyed this video, a like would be incredible. If you're new, the best thing that you can do to help me out is to subscribe. Or if you want your name here, you can join these guys by becoming one of the channel's incredible members, all linked down below.